so nice to be back. I feel like we're like on a talk show. It's like The View with mics. Do we need the mic, or can you hear me? What do you guys think? Maybe no mic, or
we can try it.
We can try it.
Up.
Okay, I have kind of a loud voice. I'm pretty loud, so. So we kind of start out by talking about how we collaborate, and it's not a big secret that Mike has been working with me for about 10 years on our books, and finally it kind of became official. And what happened was I had written kind of some, kind of contemporary women's fiction and teen kind of beach novels. And then in 2003, my editor moved from Simon Schuster to Hyperion and wanted to steal me. But it's hard to steal an author. You always have to have some kind of ruse or something. And she said they probably won't be so mad if you do a different kind of book, like a different genre. And she said, what if you wanted to do something darker, maybe like a dark fantasy? And I said, oh, I would love to. My favorite books were by Stephen King and Anne Rice, and Lord of the Rings and Dune. And I thought maybe I'll do a vampire series because nobody was writing about vampires. So, right?
It stayed that way.
It stayed that way. No. So when I started writing Blue Bloods, I told Mike, I was like, I want to do this big vampire series, and I want it to be about the vampires in the way that Harry Potter was about the wizards, so it was kind of this secret vampire world. And he kind of was from the beginning, outlining and coming up with all the ideas with me. He's the reason we have the Silver Bloods,
We slowly built. Well, the secret was that because of some immigration issues, Mel actually could not leave the country. And Blue Bloods is all about traveling to other countries. And so I had actually traveled quite a bit. Yeah. And so we wanted to travel all those places. So I would kind of write the details and help build the worlds every time they had to go to another city or be in, Venice or London.
Yeah, so we worked on the outlines together, and then in Masquerade, the book was set in Venice, and Mike had actually lived in Italy for 6 months, so he did all those kind of details and parts, and then it just got easier to be like, where have you been, honey? What can we write about? And then we actually did the outline for the prequel series, which ended up being books 5 to 7, right in, I think, when we were writing Masquerade, because we were originally going to do it as a graphic novel. So series.
Yeah, I actually drew like 4 pages. We have a little graphic novel that no one's ever seen.
Yeah,
and it was really great. So we worked
Charles and Allegra's story, and it was really fun. And we kind of used that, and they didn't buy it. We actually offered it to them, right, and when Blue Bloods first came out, and they weren't interested, and we were like, all right, whatever. But then it turned out that it was great because we knew the story, we knew the background story, so then we were able to build the rest of the novel that way. And then when I started working on Witches of East End 3 years ago, Mike was just pretty much my editor, collaborator. We worked on all the storylines, and it was just so funny because I feel like that's even girlier than Blue Bloods. But and then about 2 years ago we said, well, why don't we just do this officially? So we were going to do Wolfpack together. That was going to be our first official collaboration. And it was really a difficult one, and Frozen, we worked really well together, and we, kind of figured out how to work together, but Wolfpack was the kind of therapy book. It took 2 years of therapy to figure out.
Well, one of us would start writing and then put the pages down, and the other person would look at it and go, oh my God, that's horrible. Yeah. And then it would just repeat day after day.
And every day we had the same argument, so... but I'm still proud of that book. We pulled it out, but it was a difficult journey. And
sometimes you have to fail to succeed. So
yes. So. Fail miserably. And so about 5 years ago, we really think about our books for a long time before we even start writing them. About 5 years ago, we had an idea to write a post-apocalyptic epic fantasy. Like, from the beginning, we wanted to fuse these two genres, and maybe you can talk about the mashup.
That's kind of your spiel. Frozen is, Mel and I also always read a ton of fantasy and science fiction, just growing up, and we still read a lot of the genre, and we love it. And so we've always wanted to do a big, huge, epic fantasy, and so There's so many of them out there, you know, from Tolkien on through Robert Jordan. People have been, in all the YA versions, people have been writing these forever. So we're kind of like, how do we get into this, and how do we do all the stuff we love? And we kind of came up with this idea. We call it like the mashup. You know, mashup is where you take two songs or two genres and mix them together to kind of make a third thing. So we wanted to take sci-fi and fantasy and kind of mash them up and make something that we thought was new and kind of original and could really feel fresh to us, that was genre-defying. So in Frozen, it's in a recognizable sci-fi world. It feels a little bit post-apocalyptic, a little bit dystopian. It's after a sort of end of the world, a decline. But we took that environment and when we took our fantasy characters, we sort of took the elves out of the forest and the dragons out of the cave, and we dropped them into this horrific post-apocalyptic world. We did it in a subtle way. They're born there, and we sort of melded them into the world, and the world affects them, and it changes them, and it affects their powers and how they grow and how they live. And so what we ended up with is a kind of gritty fantasy.
Yeah.
And we really liked that idea.
Well, a lot of the reviews have said it's a genre defying, and every time I read that, I'm like, oh yes, you know, it's like that CoverGirl ad, you know, defiance. And every time I see that, I just do a little hair flip. Like, yes. You know, we defy age and genre.
But that was exciting to us. We were like, this is fun. Like, I actually have seen people say, well, what is it? Is it fantasy or science fiction? I'm like, well, it's neither.
Both.
It's a little bit of both, and that's what's cool
And
about
it's supposed to be both, and we're really excited about it. We wanted to make elves cool, you know, like how can you make elves, you know, cool? And we thought, you know, with a little bit of Generation Kill, a little bit of Battlestar Galactica, you know, kind of on top of Lord of the Rings, we could do that. So the story is set in a world where instead of global warming, which we're all familiar with and suffer from, we know what it's like to be hot. We're from LA and Palm Springs. And I think we were in Las Vegas during the summer, and I think it was 130 degrees. And I said, wouldn't it be great if it was covered in snow? And I just had this whole image of frozen New Vegas. And then we did a little research, and we discovered like one of the ways the world could end was through a global warming that became a global freeze when the polar ice caps melted and covered the world in ice and tundra. So we thought, wow, that's really cool. Let's definitely do that. Like, there's a scientific, you know, kind of theory that could happen. Like, we could be suffering from a second ice age. So I thought, all right, bring on the polar bears. So, so the world is covered in ice, and the world has ended 100 years before, and this is what is left of the world. Because we thought, what if the world ended? What would Las Vegas be like? And we thought exactly the same. Just, you know.
It's like a cockroach of civilization. It'll just never die.
Yeah, they'll just, you know, there'll still be showgirls and casinos. And, you know, we also needed to write off our Vegas expenses, so we were like, our character is a blackjack dealer. In our world, life expectancy is very short, and again, that came from a lot of research we did on kind of terrible things in the world, and most of our research, we've discovered stuff about Russia and China. And in Russia, the male life expectancy in 2001 was 58 years old, and in the United States it was 82. And we just thought, that's awful. Like, you're born in a different country and it just takes 20 years off your life. And so we thought, what if in this frozen, toxic landscape, you know, it's not a matter of what if you catch cancer, but when you did. And everybody died at 30. So if people were dying in their 30s, then that meant when you're 15, you're middle-aged. So it was like, all right, there's our genre. There's our 15-year-old blackjack dealer. Because we really like stories, you know, where the kids are the center stage and they have to kind of grow up quickly, but they're still kids. So, anyway, so that is our character, Nat, who is a poker dealer, no, a blackjack dealer. And she was also inspired by my family, actually, my cousins. I met them when I was 18, and I went to college in New York City, and my dad said, oh, I have some cousins who live in New Jersey. And they turned out to be poker and blackjack dealers in Atlantic City. and I was just fascinated by them because they were these really nice, church-going, humble Filipinos, like the most soft-spoken people you'd ever see, who could like take all your money in a card game. Card sharks, yeah. I mean, they were so cool because you just didn't expect that from them, you know. And they told me about Atlantic City and Vegas. Like one of the things about Las Vegas is a lot of the resort staff, a lot of the people who work in Vegas actually are from Hawaii. And there's very few jobs in Hawaii, so they end up, you know, having to work in Vegas. Like they have to leave paradise. So I don't know. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, Frozen is about a lot of stuff we talked about at the dinner table, and just stuff that we find is fascinating, stuff we've researched. One of the main characters in the book, in addition to like Nat and Wes, is the world itself. It's kind of has a big personality, and it's something that we spent a long time building and up and talking about. And it reflects a lot of things that we find interesting in the world, and a lot of things that are in the world right now that we've kind of amplified to think about what they might be like in the future. One of the biggest elements is this kind of toxic ocean that they spend a long time in the book. And we actually researched this thing called the gyre, which is like this giant current in the Pacific. And it moves in a slow circle, and it actually carries everything into the middle of the ocean. And what it's carried into the ocean, it turns out, is trash. Tons of trash. There's actually so much trash in this that it's double the size of Texas. There's a cloud of loose trash in the Pacific Ocean. And I just thought I almost didn't believe it when I read it, and I actually went on the internet and researched it for a while. I was like, wow, it really exists, and people have been documenting it for a long time. I thought, wow, that's horrible. And it also sort of fascinated us. I was like, well, what will that become? Like, what if that doesn't stop, you know? Like, in 100 years, and our book is 100 years in the future, what if that becomes a new landmass? What if it becomes an island or a continent? Like, will we make this horrible landscape of trash, and will people inhabit it, and what will it be like to visit that? And so that kind of fascinated us, and it became a large plot point and a place that they had to pass through and see in the book.
Yeah. And then we were all, because things in our world and figure out how to make them grosser, you know? How can we make it even worse, you know? And so there's a lot of kind of food humor in the book that we're interested in. Like we would just kind of see all around us was like all this processed food that we're all eating, you know, and find delicious. You know, like Mike said, you know, have you seen, and I didn't even believe him. He was like, there's this pizza now from Pizza Hut that's a cheeseburger pizza. It's like, it comes out and it's like cheeseburgers in a pizza. And I was like, that is gross, and I want one. So we would just see this stuff like, you know, like pancake wrapped hot dogs that are chocolate chips, waffles that are sandwiches, you know, and we were just like, how can we make this food even more disgusting? And his brother used to eat Easy Cheese. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Easy Cheese. And he would just squirt it into his mouth, like straight from the can. And so we thought, what if in the future that's how everybody ate? You know, it was like Thanksgiving in a can.
Aerosol breakfast.
Yeah, I mean, we were just like, that's
pizza in a squeeze.
Squeezers, so we had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where again, it's like we almost find it's like science fiction in our world right now. When we researched this, like one of the books I read was The Omnivore's Dilemma, and just how it's actually made out of base components of corn and soy and broken down and remade into other forms of food. And you know, when you buy that salami at Subway, it's actually made from turkey that's kind of reconstituted and died. I thought, wow, that's like science fiction. Like, what will that be in 100 years?
It'll still be edible.
Yes.
You know? Like a Twinkie.
Like a Twinkie.
So there's a lot of kind of stuff that's in the world that's inspired by the stuff that's around now. And one of the things that we were interested in too was kind of like the history of decline and the history of the Dark Ages, you know, like when the Roman Empire collapsed and Europe was Dark Ages, and we thought the end of the world also means the end of civilization and the end of culture. And what would that mean now? And one of the things that we discovered is in China, the bestsellers and the books that people like to read are not literature or fiction or novels anymore. They are actually called, and they call it in China, corporate work novels. And they are thinly disguised stories about how to move up the corporate ladder. and that's what they read. Basically instruction guides.
It's like getting home from work and reading.
Yeah, so we were just like, oh no, it'd be so sad if there were no more books and no more stories, like if imagination died. And also one of the things that we thought was really interesting about the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages was that because water was so dirty, everybody drank beer. So I was like, oh my god, everybody's going to drink beer in our book, because the water's all toxic. And Mike was like, yeah, we're writing a YA novel. Like they can't drink beer for breakfast. So we thought, okay, well, what's a different kind of thing? And, what's like a super amped vitamin water? So we came up with Nutri, like where people can't drink, fresh water. They have to drink this kind of synthetic, sedative-based water.
We called it dumb water instead of smart water.
Yeah, the dumb water. And so... So Nat is trying to. Sorry, it's my. Where is that? Nat is trying to get out of New Vegas, and so she has to, because in our world, I forgot, sliver of hope is that even though the world is ending and civilization is ending and science is breaking down, nobody knows how to fix anything anymore. Something is replacing science, and something different is coming from the ice, and that is magic. So that is a really fun thing. That's where the kind of Lord of the Rings comes in. So now people are being born with these kind of strange superpowers, and they're being kind of locked up, because that's what we do when people are strange and different. We put them in prison. So she's in prison. She's in some kind of institution, and she tries to break out. And she has a deadly secret, and she tries to find somebody who's going to help her get out of our toxic world, because there are rumors that there's a different world out there where the sky is blue and the air is fresh, and land is still green. So and nobody has ever returned from it, so it's all just kind of this rumor and based on faith. And she hires Wes, who's very handsome guy, to take her there. Because what do you need to get past our toxic landscape? A really handsome guy, right? So maybe you can talk about Wes's character a little.
Yeah. So we have these two kind of main characters that we alternate chapters with. One is Nat that Nelson talked about. The other one is Wes. He's our runner. He's our guy that kind of helps her and is her guide through this toxic landscape. And I was interested, after we came up with that idea of people only living till 30 and that sort of compressed lifespan where he's actually I think he got kicked out. He left the military. He's just left the military, and he's in his teens.
He's a vet.
Yeah, he's a vet. So you're a vet when you're a teenager. And so that was kind of a fascinating idea to me. And what I thought was they're in kind of a world where people have lost that choice of what to do. Like the whole idea of career and what you might want to become has really been eliminated. And there's really only one place he could work, and that was the military. And when he lost that position, he lost that. And so he's been forced into this sort of illegal occupation. And he was somebody who might have done something different. He might have done something creative or artistic with his life, but just there wasn't even a chance for him to pursue that. So I thought that was interesting as a character, somebody who just never had a chance to be anything they wanted, and whose occupation is kind of forced on them by circumstance.
Yeah, we wanted to write, and we actually wrote the whole book together. We didn't alternate chapters, like he didn't write the West chapters, I didn't write the Nat chapters. We both worked on everything together, because we would basically just kind of take the book forward. We would agree on the whole outline and the mythology and the series arc, and then we wrote an outline. I would write a 10-page outline, then he would take it to 15 pages, I would take it to 20. So we just kind of passed it back and forth, added details, and added stuff. So that's how the book kind of grew, is Pat. I think you wrote the first draft and I wrote the second draft, and then we just kept on passing it back and forth to each other. So Nat and Wes is as much both of us.
Well, that being said, I think a lot of the action is written by me. I think a lot of the romance is written by me.
I wrote a lot of the romance. All the kissing scenes. And I really did want to write a girl character who was strong in a different way, who wasn't like a kick-ass heroine who can do karate and, you know, do all this kind of crazy jiu-jitsu or any of that stuff. Because, you know,
No martial arts.
Yeah, or, you know, just kind of like one of those spunky fighters, you know. I just feel like, you know, between Bella and Katniss is just this huge, you know, extreme of womanhood and, you know, girlhood. And, you know, I mean, most of us aren't like that, you know. And I just thought, you know, what is a cool girl? And I thought, she's cool, you know, like she's a poker dealer. She could like play cards with the boys, but she's feminine and she, you know, she kind of kicks ass in her own way. And I just really wanted to write a character that was different from kind of the usual mold. And I actually found inspiration in a book that was very different from my genre. I read a lot of literary fiction because I end up not reading a lot of YA fantasy because I write it, and I just feel like it's too close to what I do. It actually feels like work, you know, because then I can start seeing how they built it and what the twists are. And Mike says I'm the most horrible person to take to the movies because I'm like, he did it, you know. Like I always
Stop guessing. Just enjoy.
Yeah, he's like, can't we just enjoy? And I'm like, no, you know. It's like I always want to figure out the twist. So I read a book called The Rules of Civility by Amor Towles. And it's set in 1920s Manhattan, kind of in the Great Gatsby era. And the girl in it, Katie, comes from very kind of humble beginnings. Her dad was a dock worker. And then she kind of rises from that. She becomes a magazine editor at Condé Nast. She marries into this rich Hamptons family. And the whole time, you know, she's not the typical spunky girl, you know, the rags to riches story, or the bitter, you know, ex-poor girl who now looks down on all the rich people. Like, she was just cool. Like, she was proud of her roots, but she, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but there was something about her that was so kind of real and remarkable and cool in a feminine way that I wanted to kind of capture that, and I wanted Nat to kind of have those kind of qualities. So, and Wes was a good foil for that because he's kind of cool in his own way, but he's more kind of vulnerable. So. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to go to questions?
Yeah.
Does anybody want to talk?
Yeah, sure.
Did you guys always intend for it to be a series?
Yes.
Or just...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We always intended to be a series. I mean, we have big plans for a lot of our worlds, so when we actually came in to Penguin to talk about the book, we you know, our model was Dragonlance, which I think has 30 books. So. But in Dragonlance, there's a lot of little trilogies and, you know, little quartets in the series. So we wanted to create this big world that we could write, you know, this part of it, or we could go back in time and write that part of it, or go forward, or do other characters. So I think this particular series, Heart of Dread, is going to be 4 books. So I don't like, for some reason I don't like trilogies. I like 4-book trilogies. Or I like,
You won't do it. You
I
won't do an
defy
honest
it.
trilogy.
I know, I defy the trilogies. So. So there's another series I'm working on now that I think will just be 2 books. So I don't even know what to call that. A duo.
Word for it.
Yeah.
The
Sequel.
duology.
Duology. Any other questions? Yeah, sure.
I've always wondered when you have 2 people collaborating
Yes.
on a book, if there is at any point where you get to an idea where the other one just doesn't like it, and there's
the time.
where you just can reach no compromise, you find that you just have
Yes.
to change course completely because you just couldn't get to
Interesting.
agreeing on whether you like
Yes.
it or not.
Interesting point.
Yes.
You know, I think that's a great point. What happens when you do reach that impasse? And I think that it puts the pressure on the person who's criticizing to really argue